advance, like I get really nervous. So if I talk too fast or something, like just know it's me, like just being me, I guess. But anywho, I'll share the screen.
So Celeste, if I feel like it's time to pause and see if anybody has any comments, I'll just kind of raise my finger. How's that sound?
Perfect. Yeah, because I like threw in some questions on some slides and stuff in discussions, but if like time's like not, I don't know. Like, yeah, just let me know.
Okay, we're a friendly crowd.
Yeah, y'all are great. Okay, here we go. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I had chapter 3, which is when Fat Talk got a name. The first quote in the chapter is, "I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept." I just thought I would add that in here because I think that's a very powerful quote. Moving forward. All right, so talking about when Fat Talk got a name. So I've stated the social psychology of body image, which is how Dr. Martz, I believe you and your research team first referred to Fat Talk. So the term itself was coined in 1994 by Mimi Neichter and Nancy Vukovic. It is important to note that at the time, when the term was coined by the two, it reflected Caucasian middle school girls whose appearance was based on the thin ideal, which we're going to talk more about on the next slide. But Neichter and Vukovic conducted ethnographic interviews of these middle school age girls back in the 1990s, and the project was called the Teen Lifestyle Project. The young girls were asked about their own body image, dieting, and smoking behaviors. One of the questions that was asked is, do you think girls your age are concerned about their weight, and how do you know that? So the responses proved that the dialogue was a ritualized and commonly used dialogue conversation. So then the term Fat Talk was coined. The definition itself is ritualized dialogue that critiques one's physical appearance, especially in regard to body fat, weight, shape, style, and fitness. One thing that I would also like to mention is that Fat Talk serves multiple interpersonal functions, which I have a whole slide on later on. But so I know we've been over this before, but something that's new that I mentioned is like talking about the thin ideal. So because the term reflected Caucasian middle school age girls whose appearance was that of the thin ideal, like what does this mean in regards to Fat Talk? I don't know if like I should exit out or not, but does anyone have any thoughts on that? Like how would the thin ideal relate to Fat Talk in a way? I'm not very good at wording that, so.
Are you kind of asking why a lot of the talk has to do with body size and body fat?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not very good at wording it. I guess I'll just go ahead and say what I had down. But if the ideal back then was to be thin, then fat was what was being critiqued back at that time. So what we know now, like, is that it's not always just about body fat and weight. All right, so moving on to body image, it is a multifaceted concept that refers to person's perceptions, and attitudes about their own body, particularly but not exclusively its physical appearance. So historically, body image has been seen as a personal phenomenon, meaning it's how we each individually feel about ourselves, particularly our own bodies. But with more research, it's now being seen as both personal and interpersonal. So I mentioned on the previous slide there being multiple interpersonal functions of Fat Talk, which I will go on to discuss, but my question right now is, since Fat Talk is interpersonal, like how would it affect somebody else's body image?
Okay, go ahead and exit the screen for a second.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Just so we can kind of see.
How do I actually do this? Is this it?
Unshare.
Nope. Oh, unshare.
Yeah, unshare. And
oh my God. There we go.
It takes a while to get the hang of Zoom. Whew.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. Okay. I'll just repeat the question. So if Fat Talk is interpersonal, how could it affect somebody else's body image?
The first thing that I think about when you said that question is specifically when you're like hearing someone else talking about their body, especially if they're like skinnier than you, like way, less, have certain, attributes, I guess, that you want. If they're complaining about their body, it's like, oh, if they're complaining about it, like, oh my gosh, what do I need to, like, I have to, be complaining about my body too, even more so, I guess, is my answer to that.
Yeah, that's exactly how I put it into perspective. Has anyone ever felt that way? Because like, I know I have. Like, I've definitely had those conversations where I'm just kind of like, oh, if you think that about yourself, then like, what am I?
One of the things that I've seen in the reflections, and I won't reveal anybody's personal information from the reflections, but there are several students in this class that it seems like you've been raised and by good luck have really good positive body image, which is awesome. But what I'm seeing in a lot of the reflections is there's something that you don't have that you wish you had. So in some cases, more curves, in some cases, straight hair or curly hair, different skin, that kind of stuff. And it makes me think about, like, when somebody fat talks in front of you, it just really reinforces this idea that many of us are trying to be something that we're just not, or have something that we just don't have. And it's just so sad to me to kind of think about that, like, why can't we just be satisfied? Why can't we just be ourselves and be happy with that? Any other thoughts on that?
Okay, I'll share my screen again and try to get it right this time.
You got it.
Thank you. I'm also like really shaky right now, so that's probably not helping. All right, so moving on to the social psychology of body image. It's the whole idea of fat talk being so normative and reciprocated in conversations, especially among women. This also ties in with the thin ideal, which we talked about previously, just very briefly, how that was what a lot of the research was based on in the 90s. But I mentioned that fat talk and body image go hand in hand, because by engaging in the talk, we may be harming somebody else's feelings towards their own body and self-esteem. So here are the 5 interpersonal functions of fat talk. So the first function that Nichter and Bukovic found is that fat talk is used to gain social validation and reassurance from others. So having said this, can y'all come up with some examples of what this could look like in a conversation? For instance, I'll go ahead and start off by saying, like, I feel fat today. So if I say that, like, the normal response would be like, no, you don't, like, you don't look fat today or something. Or they might even say, like, you're not, but I'm bigger than you are. Like, you're finding ways to, like, get validation and reassurance from others. Like, so do y'all have any more examples of that?
I'm curious if you all have felt that pull. Were you and do you know what you're supposed to say in that pull?
Yeah. This goes back to also the body image discussion about how it can affect someone else, because by getting that reassurance or validation, it kind of makes you have to think, like, what is the best way to respond to this? And we can always talk about that more later on as well. But the second function is that fat talk is used as a way to hide feelings of uncomfortableness, or they may not always be easily expressed. So with this in mind, it's been said that multiple researchers say that fat talk is a feminine form of powerless language. Does anyone have any ideas of what this means? The powerless language.
When I was reading about this in the book, what I got from it, and this may not be right, but I was thinking that it meant that, there's some things that we can't really complain about as a woman. And so you're trying to, like, kind of speak out and, like, complain about these things through, like, a different outlet, if that makes sense. And so it's like, if you can't complain about one thing, you got to complain about another to just, like, get those feelings out. And I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's kind of like what I understood from it And I don't know, Dr. Martz, you might be able to explain this better. But
I've just got a comment. I don't think I wrote about this in the book, but one of my former master students was a communications major as an undergrad, and she did her thesis work on fat talk as feminine language. And she taught me a lot about female linguistics. And I'll give you an example of this. So let's say we, walking on the street and we ask a man, what do you think of the president? Most men would respond with their opinion, very strongly. Well, I really like him, or I really dislike him, or almost as if it's a fact. When we ask the same question of women, they oftentimes do all these things that are called hedges and ways of kind of watering down their opinion. So it would be something like, well, what do you think of the president? Well, I don't know. Let me see. Well, he's kind of got some good qualities, but then there's one thing I don't like about him. And it's like, can you see the hedging? It's powerless. Whereas the man's like, well, I think he's great, or I think he's, almost like it's a fact. Very, very powerful way of speaking, as an example. And I actually think, if we go back and we think about Trump, the way he spoke was very powerful. It was perceived by a lot of people as very powerful. He had very strong opinions, and he was very vocal and loud at expressing them. That makes some sense? Yeah. And so it's one of the things that ever since I kind of knew about this stuff, I've been trying to work on in the way that I speak and do less of that. Well, I don't know, maybe that kind of thing. I've tried to be careful about that, as an example. Other thoughts of how it could be feminine linguistics, or how fat talk could be like powerless? When it comes to why do you think women, instead of expressing their true emotion, would oftentimes instead say, I feel fat? So instead of I'm angry, or I'm upset, or I'm frustrated, or I'm hurt, or I have low energy today, or why do you think it would go over to the I feel fat instead of just pure expression of what's going on?
I think since fat talk is so normative, women might feel more comfortable talking about that than more serious emotions and things going on in their lives.
I would say it's also hard sometimes to even pinpoint exactly how you're feeling at times, and that by engaging in something that is pretty much related, like a normal part of conversation, I think it can also make it easier. I know that from experience. Sometimes I genuinely don't know why I'm upset about something.
And that's a good point, both Emma and Celeste. And I do a lot of that. And I think a lot of therapists do a lot of that in therapy, is helping people get in touch with what is the root emotion they're experiencing. Because a lot of times things get covered up with something else. Like a classic one would be, and again, it's more acceptable for men to express anger, but usually anger is an outlet for sadness or hurt. Women are not, it's not nearly as socially acceptable for us to express anger, particularly if you were raised in the South. That's kind of a cultural thing also. So how does anger come out a lot of times in a woman?
I know I cry when I'm angry. It's really embarrassing, but I start crying, and it's I don't know, it scares the crap out of people because they're like, I don't know what's going on, but I know that's what happens to me. So it's just I don't know, frustration, or just a bunch of emotions, and it's bottled up, I guess, more so than being able to express it in an angrily way, if that makes sense. I don't know.
I'm the same way too. I'll either cry or I'll get really quiet, and that's when I'm mad. But I'm not, I just don't like being mad. So it's I definitely try to keep it all in, for sure.
And some of it realistically is that when women get mad at someone else, they're more likely to anger that someone else, who then may retaliate against them. So there's that potential risk. in some situations. Anger almost begets one-up anger. And I know that I've learned over time, and I learned this more clinically, if I'm working with somebody who gets really, really angry, if you don't acknowledge the anger, they one-up it and they get worse. And so one of the best ways of being able to diffuse anger in someone else is to get in there right away and say, I can really see you're angry, and acknowledge it so it doesn't keep escalating. You know, it's kind of like you think about somebody in their anger. At first they're angry and they're bleh, and then they start yelling. It's a little bit of like them getting this feeling like, I don't think you're listening. You haven't acknowledged my anger. So now I'm going to get louder and then maybe you'll listen. Does that make some sense? And so keep that in mind. Just kind of keep that in your back pocket. If you're ever around somebody who's really, really angry, a nice way of diffusing it is just acknowledging the emotion. And for a lot of people, it's like, yeah. And then we know a lot of times there's other stuff underneath the anger, the sadness, the frustration, the hurt, all of that, you know, the wound, that kind of thing. But it's not a great idea when somebody's angry at you going, I don't think you're angry. I think you're sad or frustrated, because then they're going to get more angry at you. Right. But yeah, just a nice way of kind of knowing how to diffuse that. Has anybody else had sort of the Sophie experience, but when you've been mad at somebody, you start crying and then you're like, dang it. I'm trying to be tough here and now I'm crying. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Does anyone else have any final thoughts on that? We're good. All right. We share it again. So we are now on the third interpersonal function, if I can get this to work. Okay, there we go. So the third is bat talk is a way to relieve guilt that may arise from participating in behaviors that elicit weight gain. So it is a very common belief that women are always concerned about their weight, at least nowadays it is, especially. I actually have a video clip that kind of demonstrates this behavior. I'm not sure if y'all have seen Freaky Friday. If I can, there we go. But this is just a clip that I have. Can you hear it? Okay.
Oh, we can't hear it.
Oh, you can't? Oh no. I do not know how to get that working then.
The little sound bar won't stay out, will it?
Go up to like the three dots at the top and then go down to share computer sound.
Oh. Okay. We'll see if this works. It's good. Okay.
It's gone. And what is this? What have you done to my ear?
Mom, it's an earring.
Take it out. Take it out right now.
No, it looks cool.
Oh, don't start with me. And those clothes are going back first thing tomorrow.
Why? Everyone likes them. You look great.
I look like Stevie Nicks.
Who's he?
And what are you doing with this?
I'm eating.
You cannot eat fast food.
Why not?
Because it will go down your throat and drop instantly to my thighs.
Oh, come on.
Watch the road. Oh, this food may make you blow up like a balloon, but it will do nothing whatsoever to me.
Oh, Mom.
Oh God, this is good.
Mom, that's not fair.
My first French fry in 8 years. I can hear the Hallelujah chorus.
Okay. Just real quick. So have any of y'all heard anyone use the terms like it's going to drop instantly to my thighs, or like you're going to blow up like a balloon, or like I'm going to blow up like a balloon? Okay. Because it's like just those like small little things that we say that relating to our weight, like one French fry is not going to instantly cause you to gain immediate weight like that. I just wanted to show that example because of like just how sometimes it is just so easily said. And I know last night my younger sister and I were texting and she was like, gosh, I really want spaghetti and meatballs right now. And this was like at 1 a.m. And she's like, but a beach body sounds nice too. And I was like, Annette, just eat the dang meatballs, like eat the spaghetti, you're hungry. but like as a response to her, I was like, well, come on up to Boone, like we can both eat it together because I have some here, like kind of thing. So have y'all ever experienced something like that where you find yourself talking about weight, or fat talk with weight? I'm not good at wording it, but just like any kind of conversations, kind of like the one I just showed in the video, or also like about my sister, I guess.
I know I've had a lot of conversations with my mom, who's often like trying to eat really healthy and be really healthy about what she eats. And I grew up with the philosophy where like my mom always had like a little bowl of candies on the table. And it was like, if you want one, or you're craving sweets, or you want like chocolate or something, you go and you have one. And that's it. Because my mom had the experience growing up where she wasn't allowed to have a lot of candies and a lot of sweets and a lot of chocolate. And so she, even now, will like restrict herself from eating it. And then when she gets the opportunity to eat it, she like overdoes it and she has too much of it. And then she feels really bad about herself. So we've kind of gotten into the habit of like, when my mom says like, oh, I really want something sweet, we'll like have a little something together. And it's very much like, listen to what your body has to tell you, because it could have like worse repercussions later, I guess.
Yeah.
And Vivian, you brought up a very good point that for a lot of different things, restriction ends up with a rebound, you know, and with food restriction, people who restrict oftentimes move on to binge eating. And so I like that idea of like, if there's something that you feel like you're craving and you want, allow it for yourself, but allow it for yourself. You know, if you restrict and you allow it for yourself, oftentimes people are going to overdo, you know? And so one of the things that really makes me mad in Hollywood is we oftentimes will see what are the women doing when they're upset? What do they reach for to eat? And the TV shows and the
Ice cream.
Chocolate.
Yeah, chocolate, but a lot of times ice cream, and it's right out of the carton, isn't it? You know, it's like, stop modeling, you know, that kind of stuff. It's almost like modeling binge eating for coping with emotions. It's like, oh, you know, show somebody enjoying ice cream when they're happy. You know?
Really. Anyone else have more thoughts? If not, I can share my screen again.
Have you heard friends, family fat talking when eating food?
100%.
Yeah, and do you hear men do that? Yeah, they're just more like, yay, yum, food. Yeah, which is what we could strive for, you know, is what more women could strive for, like, yay, food.
I definitely have heard men do it though, but I feel like it depends on how they were raised. Because I have a lot of guy friends who do it more than I do, which is, I always found it interesting. Like they talk about weight way more than I do.
And is it muscle talk at all, Jama, or is it fat talk?
It's fat talk. It's like the idea of like getting like a dad bod or a beer belly. And I know that like in society that's definitely accepted more, but I definitely have heard men talk about it.
I know we had a talk about this last time on Tuesday about the whole seltzers, like the alcoholic seltzers. I see a lot of my guy friends talking about weight in regards to like drinking too much beer, like in fear of the belly and stuff, and that they switched over to the ones that had less calories so that it would in the long run help them. So I know that's where I've heard it with my guy friends. Even my dad, he gave up like soda for Lent, and he was like hoping that it would help him lose some weight. And so I know for me, it's very common, and I never realized it until reading this book, honestly, and having these discussions.
Yeah, what kind of context are you all hearing when people fat talk when around food? Is it particular kinds of food or just any food, or?
I often find it to be
or at least in my house with my family, it's like big meals. So like if you have a big Thanksgiving dinner or like a Christmas dinner or a holiday dinner, a lot of the times, at least in my family, it's, oh, I ate too much, I ate too much, I ate too much, I'm gonna regret this tomorrow, I ate too much, that kind of thing, more so than what they ate. I don't know if that's just my family and an anomaly, but that's just what I've noticed.
And those holiday meals like are set up for overeating. I mean, I don't think anybody undereats at a holiday meal or gets it just right. You know, it's kind of contextual that's what's going to go on. Okay, others? Particular
I
kinds
was
of.
gonna say that I hear, sorry. I was gonna say, like, I hear from a lot of people, like, the difference between good foods and bad foods. And so it's like, if they're like, okay, I'm hungry, like, I want carbs, like what Celeste said, like, I'm gonna go have some spaghetti and meatballs, but it's not gonna get me my beach body, then they're like, it's okay, like, I'll just have a protein shake or I'll have an orange. And I'm like, no, like, don't wire your brain to think that, like, there's foods that are bad and foods that are good. Like, all food is good for you. That's why it's made. But like some you have to have more moderation with. And I go by like the 80-20 rule. So like if I want a cheeseburger on a Tuesday, like I'm just gonna have a cheeseburger instead of like a lot of people that I know, they wait until the weekends to just like eat everything that they want and then they eat healthy throughout the week. And I feel like that creates such bad like eating habits for them.
I listened to on NPR, a reporter went out and interviewed all these dietitians, trying to find what is the perfect type of diet for health. And she kept running into kind of conflicting messages, even when she was interviewing the experts, the RDs. And I loved how she concluded her story. She's like, and what I really learned about eating healthy and getting good nutrition is now I pray before I eat and I give gratitude for food. And it was just like, kind of like, you know, realizing, yeah, there is no perfect way, right, of eating. Food is food, you know.
That's part of the reason why I also am minoring in nutrition, because I just think there's so much that goes hand in hand with these conversations we're having now. Like, just I want everyone to have a good relationship with it and do what they need to do, kind of thing. But anyway, does anyone have anything else to add before I go back? Are we good? All right. I think I'm getting better at the transitions, maybe. Okay, so I think we are now on to the fourth function of Fat Talk, which can create a sense of being part of a group and or affiliation. So this function focuses on what we know as like in-groups and out-groups. The in-groups share similar values about physical appearance and how for the group it's important to behave, dress, and weigh a certain way. So I had a video clip example, but I was just gonna go ahead and ask like, or just say it's from Mean Girls. I feel like Mean Girls has just a lot on this topic that like demonstrate what it means. So I'm just gonna quickly play it. It's when Regina is now on her diet that Katie had given her. And if this is not, let me know if the sound works this time too. Okay.
We have to talk to you. Is butter a carb? Yes. Gina, you're wearing sweatpants. It's Monday. So? So that's against the rules, and you can't sit with us. Whatever. Those rules aren't real. They were real that day I wore a vest, because that vest was disgusting. You can't sit with us! These sweatpants are all that fits me right now. Fine. You can walk home, bitches.
Watch where you're going, fat ass.
All right, so as we saw in the clip, basically Regina was not dressed the way that their group had set rules for. And so she is then part of what is called the out group. So it's anyone who does not fit into the values that the in group has. I know like in a lot of movies, we see it where you have stereotypical groups of in high school, for example, like how they dress and act and what kind of values they share. I know that's just common in everyday life. But moving on to the fifth function of Fat Talk, it is a form of self-control and impression management. So in a 2007 study done by Tucker, Martz, Curtin, and BAZZINI, it was found that college women conform to their partner's fat talk or positive body talk. So in other words, it is easier to be in a group by engaging in conversations that the majority are talking about. So for instance, sometimes we may feel pressured to say negative things about our bodies rather than positive things because the majority may be speaking more negatively. Do y'all agree with this, that we tend to kind of go along with what the majority of groups are saying?
I spoke a minute ago about the linguistics and how the kind of the negative aspects of feminine language. But one of the things that women tend to do better than men, and we saw it in the Tucker study, like whatever the Confederate came out with their body image, the participant leaned in that direction. But one of the good things about that as women is a lot of times we can find commonality in other people, which is a really nice way of engaging and beginning a relationship. Do you all agree with that? Of like, we're kind of good at finding what is this person interested in and can I find some commonality there? Can anybody give an example?
I just think, you know, like when I was coming to college trying to make friends, you try to find people that like have common interests as you, or like, you know, like certain things that you do. And so growing up in high school, I was very involved in like my church and ministry at home. And so I found friends through a ministry on campus called Crew. And so we were able to like have that common ground of Christianity and like, you know, trying to like spread the gospel and whatnot with people, and found like that common ground. And so it can be anything from like sport. I know in high school I played a lot of sports too, and so a lot of my friends were athletes, and so anything that you can find common ground in, I feel like that's something, you know, that unites you, and like, you know, that's the foundation for your friendship no matter what it is. So that's kind of my example.
Similar to what you said, like freshman year, I became really good friends with this one girl on my floor because she and I both liked going to the gym. And so that's kind of how we bonded. It was just something we would do every week, almost every other day together. And like, that's how we formed a really good, strong friendship, is just like having that same interest. Any other thoughts on this topic?
I was just gonna say, I feel like women tend to have more diverse friend groups than men. A lot of times, like I feel like men like other men that are like the same as them. Like they do the same thing, they like the same thing, they like act the same way. But I feel like women are more likely to be friends with people that have more differences because they're able to find like the smaller commonalities between each other.
Yeah. I think there's more flexibility in women too. And the research suggests that women conform more than men. And we always think about conformity as being this bad thing. You know, if your friend jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff kind of thing? But in a lot of ways, conformity is that finding commonality and joining somebody where they're at. We had a situation recently where my partner hiked the entire AT, and he's become friends with this other guy that did the AT a couple of years ago. And they would communicate a lot when the guy was out on the trail, you know, with strategies and things like that. Anyways, he came to visit recently, and other than enjoying hiking, I really have no commonality whatsoever with this friend. But he found out that I enjoy investing in the stock market, Bitcoin, stuff like that. And once we realized that we both do that kind of stuff, we do the stock trades and things, it just burst. You know, we were just like, and do you know about, and we're on our phone, and we're showing each other stuff. And do you know, you sell short, I only sell long, that kind of stuff. And my partner was kind of like, oh my gosh, like what just happened here? But we found commonality in something that we were very interested in. It was just like, yeah.
This kind of makes me think of the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I don't know if y'all have seen it. If you have, this is what it's making me think of. Like, they're all so different. And we see that in the movie, their stories are all different, but they share that commonality, like other than just the pants, like they're obviously all friends. So like, I don't know, just kind of made me think of that.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna go back and share my screen. I will say the next slide I have is more of a discussion slide. So if we want to come back to that later, that is totally fine, but it is, if it clicks through, there we go. The universal girl language. And like, I just wanted to have this slide as a way for us to all kind of talk about it. But by participating in Fat Talk, it means we're not alone. It's just like, as we've been talking about before, it's so common and it's easy to kind of bond by using this in our conversations with others. Another form of expressing feelings as well that we mentioned. I added in, it's kind of like unspoken rules, girl code. And I don't know if y'all can see, but with this image, a set of unwritten rules, guidelines that girls are to follow in order to create solidarity within their friendships. So, and of course it's Regina George. But yeah, so like, I just kind of, this whole conversation of Fat Talk, especially in this chapter, just kept having that thought come into my mind that this is kind of girl code. Like when someone says, for example, I feel fat today, it's expected that we should counter that statement, reassure the person, and create that validation that they need. More so, it was found that 93% of college women engage in Fat Talk. When I read that number, I mentioned it in my reflection. I thought it would be higher because it is so common, and that is already a high percentage. But I wanted to know kind of what y'all were thinking in regards to that. Like, was that a shocking percentage, or is that just about how you would think it would be? Any thoughts on that percentage?
Who do you think might be represented in the 7% that don't? Any thoughts on that?
I don't know how to like explain it, but I do feel like there are women out there who just genuinely don't care about like, and I feel like everyone like doesn't care about how like everyone looks, like they don't really care about comparison and things like that. But like my mom, if I were to ever like fat shame myself or like even say something that I don't like about myself, immediately she'll just change the subject. Like that's just not a subject that she likes to engage in. So I feel like that 7% is probably people who just don't like to engage in that kind of topics, maybe.
No, that's a good point too, because not everyone is comfortable with sharing like those kinds of things, like the feelings, which we talked about. It could be an indirect way of kind of expressing how we feel. Some people are just not comfortable with sharing their feelings.
And we're going to see a little bit later in the, I think it's the next chapter, if memory serves me, that amongst Black women, there tends to be a lot less fat talk because there's a little bit more ownership of a unique way of being, like being yourself and being unique, as opposed to let's all try to look like one another. So I wonder if that's some of the 7%. Other thoughts? Could the 7% just be people with good body image?
I know just an experience recently that I had. I was on a video call with a couple of my friends from out of state, and one of my friends had her cat laying on her lap, and so she like tilted the camera down to show us like her cat. She was like, "You guys can see my fat tummy, I'm sorry." And immediately one of my other friends, who's also a girl, she was like, "Well, we love fat tummies here," and just moved on. And I feel like there's a lot of people who are like adapting to like, instead of using fat talk, it's like embracing fat talk instead of embracing fat talk in a way that's like positive rather than embracing fat talk and talking negative, I guess.
I know like within my friend group, we try to do similar things of trying to like help each other with body image. So I know that one of my friends was struggling with it first coming into college, and we didn't engage in the idea of fat talk, but we also didn't ignore it either. But we sat down at the right time and just like talked about like, hey, like, how can we support you in this? So I just feel like different groups approach it differently, because I know that like we all are pretty set in like where we are with body image, but I think also we support each other in getting to that place when like, so it's not like we're perfect, we all have insecurities, but like I just feel like our group dynamics a little bit different in that idea.
But it sounds like that was a little more deliberate, like on, intentional. Yeah.
Any more thoughts before we move on? Sorry. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share again. Thank you all for participating in that little discussion slide. The last bullet I made was, is fat talk and addiction, which I would like to save kind of for the end, like so that we can all spend a little bit more time talking about it. But I'm going to go ahead and move forward to, if it lets me move forward, there we go. So we have our first research study, there we go. So this is the 2012 research study, so by BARWICK, BAZZINI, Martz, and ROCHELEAU. So the question being asked in this is, does the size of a target woman who is fat talking and engaging in positive body talk impact her perceived likability by other women? So in the study, 63 women who were mostly Caucasian were asked to read a vignette about 4 women who were studying for a biology exam. So the 4 women's conversations would drift to either negative or positive body talk. The name of the target woman is Jenny, and this was chosen because 20 years prior, it was like a popular, like Jennifer was a popular baby name, and this just like allowed it to be more relatable for the participants in this study. So in the photographs, there were 2 blondes and 2 brunettes that were said to be equally attractive, but one woman of each hair color was heavier than the other 2. So what they found in the study is that the size of Jenny did not have a significant impact on her likability, but when she engaged in fat talk, it was less surprising than when she spoke about her body positively. So even though the fat talk was more expected, they preferred to hear the positive body talk. There we go. So I had written down like, what are some characteristics that you would associate with someone who engages in positive body talk? I know that for me, like it's not something I hear often, but it is something that I would love to hear. And whenever I do hear it, it's nice because it's a change. Kind of how we said, like the 93% like engage in fat talk, that 7% who may or may not participate in positive body talk. It's just something that it's nice to hear. And the researchers actually said that, or the participants said that Jenny was said to be friendlier, more confident, sophisticated, outgoing, assertive, interesting, and just like a responsible person when she engaged in positive body talk. So let me stop sharing my screen again, but I know that was a quick overview of that research study, but do any of y'all have thoughts on what they found? Like, was it surprising that like that she spoke positively about her body, and like how the participants thought of her as being like more confident? Like, is this, what are y'all's thoughts on that?
Do you get a picture of self-esteem? Like if you were to hear positive body talk, like this is a woman who feels comfortable in her skin?
I have a friend who is like extremely confident in herself, and I can just tell like when we're out in public, just the way that she carries herself. She's very assertive and knows that I guess she's just extremely confident in herself and like does not have any insecurities really. which is nice to be around because she's, you know, that boosts me up as well when I'm out with her.
I have a friend also like that. They're honestly so great to have. But it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but almost uncomfortable when you're not like, you're being like, so me, I'm not feeling my best that day. And when my assertive, confident friend is like uplifting me, it almost creates this uneasiness where I'm just like, whoa, like that's different. Like I'm expecting it to be like, oh, I also feel like crap today kind of thing, because I'm so used to that. So like I don't know if that's kind of what you were getting at there, but like that's how I feel with it. It is surprising to me.
I was goofing around on Facebook. Oh, I sound funny. Anyways, I was goofing around on Facebook a little bit earlier, and I was watching one of those clips where they had celebrity women, and when reporters asked them a sexist question, and how they responded differently to it. You know, as one example, somebody's on the red carpet and they're like, "What are you wearing?" And then the camera scans the body, and you know, and she comes back with, "Do you do this to the men? Do you ask this question? What are you wearing?" And scan the body, you know, the camera scan the body of the men, that kind of thing. But my favorite one, and I didn't even recognize who she was in a radio booth, and she was reading off questions that were sent to her. And the question she lands on is, "What is your favorite position?" Like sexual position, right? And you can see her surprise when she reads it, and she's like, "What is your favorite position?" And then she goes, "CEO, corporate executive officer." And it was like, what a wonderful response to that, you know? It's like, yeah, you go.
That is awesome.
But you get a feel for when those people push back against those sexist questions. You get a feel that they have self-esteem and that they have strength and that they're willing to buck the system and not get lured into answering those sexist questions. It's like, yeah.
Definitely something I would like to work on with myself, just being a little bit more assertive and direct. I definitely am the one who's like, "I'm sorry." Like I say sorry for everything, which I don't, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, do any of the rest, like, does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? We're good? Okay. Go back. I can, there we go. Okay, so now we have the Corning and Bucchianeri, 2016 study. So there were two parts to the study, and in the first one, we have 130 college women, where 72.1% were Caucasian women. They were also shown the 8 photographs, 4 thin and 4 overweight women. And each photo was accompanied by fat talk or self-affirming statements. So the participants were asked to use a genuineness survey. And one of the questions that they asked was, how much do you believe that she really means the statement she made about her body? So on the scale, it was 1 to 7. 1 was like, I do not believe it at all. And 7 was like, I completely believe what she said about her body. And the results is that the fat talk, regardless of weight, was more believable than the positive body talk. In the second study, we have 125 college women with the same demographics. And this one, it was a within subject experiment. This means that each participant saw all 8 photos that were crossed for fat talk and positive body talk. So each of the pictures had an equal chance of being shown first. The results were that overweight women who fat talked were more believable than 3 conditions, which are 1, 2, 3. So the thin women's fat talk, overweight women's self-affirming talk, thin women's self-affirming talk. But so, however, the thin women's fat talk was more believable than their self-affirmation. And then overweight women's self-affirmations were more believable than thin women's. So overall, like overweight body talk was more believable than thin body talk. And then I added, like, why is this the case? I know that I just said that all probably really fast, handling the nerves very well, but I'm just gonna leave this slide up here for that information for anyone who needs to like refer to it. But I just found it interesting that like, well, as it was found in the first study, that fat talk, regardless of weight, was more believable than any kind of self-affirmation. So that, I guess, would be my question, like, does anyone have thoughts on these two studies? Like, why would, oh, sorry. So like, why would the overweight body talk be more believable than the thin body talk?
Do you think if you heard someone who's larger say self-affirming things about their body, do you think it's like, wow, that she's evolved, like she's really come a long way to be able to feel good about herself even though she's large? Do you think there would be some believableness in that? Do y'all think fat talk's more believable just because it's normative?
I would say that because it is so common and used a lot in conversations, that it would be more believable. And it's kind of like what I said on the previous discussion that we had, that like when you have an assertive, confident person contradicting like what you're saying or how you're feeling about yourself, it kind of creates that sense of uneasiness. So I think in this study, maybe when there was positive talk, it wasn't as believable because it didn't create that like common feeling that we get when we do engage in fat talk. Would y'all kind of agree with that, or thoughts on that? Okay. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so I have another study in 2014. It was thin versus overweight photos again. So this study had a bit more variety with 71% Caucasian, 13.6% Latina, 8.6% Asian, and 5.8% others. In this study, the difference compared to the last is that the 8 photos were randomized. It is also a within subject study, but having the randomized photos, like this is the one where the photos had an equal chance for being the first one for participants to see. The measure, or the dependent variable, is the measure of body dissatisfaction of the participants. It was found to be worse when thin women fat talked and talked about their bodies in a positive way. There we go. It was lower after seeing the overweight women fat talk. And it was lowest when overweight women made positive body statements. So here is another question, if y'all can read it. So like, why do you think that a thin woman who engages in both fat talk and positive body talk has harmful effects on others more than an overweight woman's? Comments. Stop share. There we go.
I think if I remember correctly, in the book, it was kind of referred to as being similar to like secondhand smoke, where like if you're hearing this woman who's very thin and like that's the ideal, it's hard to, and if you don't fit that ideal, it's hard to like listen to, because if they're thin, then what am I? And we kind of already touched on this earlier as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you think just hearing it in others starts that social comparison process? Because I think that's what you were alluding to, Vivian. It's like, okay, she's talking about body image. That's going to make me think about body image, my body image. Yeah.
I have a quick question that like just came to mind is, I don't know, like when you were doing research for the book, or like if we'll talk about this later on, but when does like fat talk seem to start in children? Like it has to, like, comparison of weight has to come from something. Like would it come possibly from their parents, and that's when they start comparing themselves to other people? And then like I wonder what it is like between like if we learn at a young age that like women, it's just easier to compare fat talk than talking with the guys. So like when would that have started? I'm just very interested on in the whole like yeah.
I do know there's a study, and I believe they're 4-year-olds, and they had pictures of for the 4-year-olds of other little kids of different body sizes, and then a little kid in a wheelchair. So a kid with a disability. And they had the kids rank order the pictures in the order that they would want to be friends with these other children. And they ranked on average, these little 4-year-olds ranked the fat kid the least likely they wanted to be a friend with. And so that's not speaking to the fat talk, but it's definitely speaking to the fat stigma in our culture. Seems to get ingrained in these kids quite young.
Well, that's what I wonder, because I feel like when you take it back to like history, you would like way back, like with cavemen and stuff, you'd kind of want to befriend people who are like a little bit bigger because like they possibly like they know where the good food is. But at the same time, I wonder like in our brains if we're also like, but what if they take all of my food? So you'd want to go with someone who's skinnier, who doesn't eat as much.
Yeah, some of the evolutionary biology stuff is that it can signal, if it signals gluttony, it's the idea of you're going to take my food. Yeah. And then that might make me at risk. But I like the idea of like, well, if you've been able to find ample food to get fat, then show me where you live.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Where you find this. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Celeste.
You're fine.
I know that in the developmental class, they talk about the gender stereotypes starting in like as young as like 4 in early elementary school. So I bet that that's also when like the society, because like definitely in the class, they relate it to societal expectations of genders. And so I bet that's when even like the fat phobia and the fat perception starts as well.
When my older son, Christian, I think he was probably about 4-ish. I can't remember exactly. He was trying to wrap his head around biological sex. And he became obsessed with it for a while. It was like, I'm a boy and I've got a penis and I've got testicles. And it's like, yes, like at the dinner table, we're talking about this stuff. And then I remember him at one point, kids follow you into the bathroom. There's no privacy when you've got little ones. And he's like, Mama, you don't have a penis. It's like, no, I don't, because I'm a woman, I'm a girl. And then I still remember his little sexist comment was at one point, he's like, so what you got? And then I explained to him, well, I have a uterus, which is where I grew you and I grew your brother, and I have a vagina, and I didn't go into all the details and that kind of stuff. And he's trying to wrap his head around, wrapping his head around it. I still remember one evening, a babysitter came to the door and he answers and he's like all excited to see her. And he's like, are you a girl? And she's like, yeah. And he goes, do you have a uterus? And she turns red and she's like, yeah. And then he goes, you got a baby growing in your uterus? She's like, no. But he was just struggling trying to understand this concept of like the differences. And it was kind of cute. I mean, yeah. So other thoughts, do you think these kids get this kind of stigma and they get this kind of cultural reaction pretty early on? I think about when you look at the weight, we're going to get into this a little bit later in the book, but when you get into the fat stigma and the weight teasing literature, it is absolutely awful what happens to individuals when they have been teased about their appearance, teased about their weight. And I feel for these individuals who I think it starts so early in preschool and school, just very unfortunate bullying based on individuals' weight.
I think children are also exposed a lot to like with movies coming out and their TV shows, like I know we had this discussion from a previous chapter about like the Disney princesses, for instance, like or Barbies, where they, or at least like Elsa and Anna, for example, like very thin ideal right there, and they're good people, like they're portrayed as the good guys. So like I wonder if that also factors into something like this as well.
I've seen a post going around recently that was like comparing like me when I was 14 and like kids now when they're 14 or in middle school or whatever. And a lot of posts comparing like kid actors and like when they were on the red carpet or whatever when they were like 12 or 13 and compared to now, and how much more like unfortunately like sexualized these really young girls are. And I think like that age is where you start thinking about like appearance and how you look and how like attractive you look is unfortunately getting like younger and younger. So I'd be curious to see if maybe in the next couple of years there's any like hard data that comes out about that.
I'd be interested to know too, because I see that everywhere online. I definitely don't, it did not look like that back then at all. Okay. I'll go ahead and share my screen again, and if there's time, we can definitely talk more later on. But right now, I'm going to share the last study that was in this chapter. Let me just click through. Okay, so this is a sweaters versus bikinis study done in 2003. So the participants who were part of the study believe they were completing a study for clothing marketing campaigns. They were asked to either try on a swimsuit or a sweater. But there was a Confederate who was in the adjacent stall to the participants. So she was just in her regular clothes. She didn't change into a bikini or a sweater. But what they had her do was express body dissatisfaction or a non-body related topic, for instance, talking about computer problems, which was the control condition of the study. So the participants in the adjacent stalls were led to believe that the research assistant was trying on the same clothes that they were. So they, for instance, were trying on a bikini. They had the impression that whoever was next to them was also trying on a bikini. So what they found, sorry, I'll move that over. So they never saw each other once in the study. And as a result, so the participants in a swimsuit who were exposed to the fat talk and the body dissatisfaction had fewer negative emotions than the participants who were in a sweater exposed to the same comments made by the research assistant. I wanted to talk about this one in particular because why do you think that the women in the bikini experienced lower levels of negative emotions than the participants who were fully clothed and in the sweaters? I found it to be an interesting result because if I know for a fact, if I were standing in a mirror in a bikini, I would be, you see your whole body pretty much, it's out there. And I find it interesting that the one who was, I'm in a bulky sweater right now, like I can't see anything like that, they would have more negative emotions. So I would love to talk about this real quick. I keep doing that. There we go. Does anyone have any comments they would like to make about that? So like, why do you think there were lower negative emotions in someone in a bikini?
How I perceived it was that the person in the bikini who was hearing the fat talk, if they had any insecurities, the fat talk made them more sure of themselves because they're like, oh, other people also. So it goes back to that like in-group perception of being like, oh, people also have insecurities, and so this is okay, and so that's why.
Like the common bond, I guess, when you engage in it. So then, with that in mind, why do y'all think like the one in the sweater, do you think it's because like having more coverage just starts to make you think more about what you look like, or what are your thoughts on that one?
it seems like with the bathing suit, to kind of tag along with what Jama said, that, you know, it's like, okay, here I am exposed and somebody else is fat talking, and it's that commonality. But do you think in the bulky sweater, it's just sort of like you're not thinking about body image? Like it's not that idea hasn't been evoked. And so hearing somebody's fat talk at that point just doesn't seem appropriate. I love this study. I think it's such a clever kind of real life study, the way they did it, with some interesting results, but certainly saying that maybe fat talk has a time and a place.
Yeah, I would agree with that also.
I was gonna say, I feel like normally when people put on like heavier sweaters, you think of like comfort. So you're not really trying to like pick out your insecurities right now versus like when you're in a bathing suit, you like expect to say like, oh, I feel so fat, or like, oh, do you like see this little like pouch that you're supposed to have? Because I mean, it covers your ovaries, but like you can pick apart yourself like more when you're in a bathing suit versus a sweater. And when you're in like your comfort area, you don't really want to pick yourself apart anymore. You kind of just want to like be relaxed.
That's a really good point. Like I'm wearing the sweater now because I have to go to work right after this, and I just wanted to be comfortable and not like think about how I look too much. So I guess like in this case, when you are covered up like that in a bulky sweater, like hearing someone else fat talk when you are under the impression they're wearing the same thing, I think would also make me think like, oh, this was just for comfort. Like what's going on?
I think going off of that, like whenever you're in a bikini or just like showing any skin at all, you're able to kind of like embrace your body no matter like what size you are or whatever. You know, I know for me, it's like I feel more confident when I'm wearing, which is weird because like I'm not too like confident in my body in general, but whenever I like wear a crop top, it's like, okay, like, you know, you're confident enough in yourself to show a little skin, and it's kind of like, I guess can like display like your sexuality in a way. I get like as I'm a woman, like I can show my skin kind of thing, and it's like confidence just coming from that, and maybe not just it's not all about like your body, but it's just like, you know, showcasing that you like are confident. And have y'all ever heard that like if you smile like for long enough, it actually like releases endorphins in your body and like makes you happier? I think the same thing probably goes for if you think enough like confidence about your body, that's eventually like, you know, whatever you think is, that's how you're going to think about yourself. And so whenever you wear like a bikini or something and you're feeling confident about your body, that's how you're going to feel, versus like wearing a sweater when you're completely covering yourself. It's like you're not like you know, showcasing yourself. And I mean, I love sweaters as much as the next girl, but you know, I don't know, that's just my ideas on it. So
I was also going to say, I'd love to see like this study done in like the different geographical locations, like body confidence and how they feel. Because if you are in like a beach town that's in Florida or like the Keys, where people just walk around in bikinis all day, like even into grocery stores and like roller skate with like no clothes on, I know that their body confidence is like probably, I mean, it has to be studied, would be a little bit higher than people who live in like Alaska, where they're constantly covered. And so when they're in like exposed like that, I wonder if their confidence is a little bit more like fragile than like people near beach towns.
As an example of that, 2 of our former master's students have created a business. It's called Chrysalis, and it's in Wilmington. And Chrysalis is an eating disorders treatment center. And the students at UNCW, there are more eating disorders there than there are like at App State. And there's definitely a fitness culture in Wilmington also, but it makes some sense. There's a lot of that beach culture. And, you know, so there's just more experiences in bathing suits for those students than, you know, like us up here at App, you know, we're in our hiking gear and our, you know, whatever, when we're roaming around. So it's just not that exposure.
That actually reminded me when I was in Finland, because like obviously Finland's very cold. It's like up and close to the Arctic Circle. And but they have saunas. They have almost as many saunas as they do people in the country. And like so like mm, body image and like being naked is very normalized there, and it's just very much like accepted, like all bodies are accepted. And I'm sure they of course have some eating disorders and some insecurities there, but I also know that all bodies are very much normalized because they grow up naked in saunas together with random people, and that's just totally normal. And so like even though it is a country where like they wear a lot of clothes to stay warm, they also have this culture of saunas that I think improves the body image of like all body types and stuff. So
When I think about, y'all tell me this, has this changed at all in the dorms or in the high school locker room? Were the guys like doing everything, showering in front of one another without like, when I was in college, the guy bathrooms and the guy dorms were open showers. Now they had toilets and they had urinals, so they had privacy in the toilet. But when they showered, it was like, there was just like a wall with shower heads. But in the gal dorms, we had individual stalls for when we showered. Anybody?
I'm not sure what the guys did necessarily back in freshman year. I was on campus for a year, but I know like I had like my experience, like the girls like honestly didn't care that much. We were just kind of like, here we are, like the stall's really small to begin with. Like we just wanted to get in and get out. So like it was just a very quick like I think we just were kind of like, we just got to do what we got to do kind of thing. I think the guys walked around more in their towels, that's for sure. I've been locked out before, like after a shower, so that's like different. But they were more comfortable like just walking around kind of like afterwards, like as is. I think the girls did what they could to cover up immediately and or like make it back fast.
But it just makes me wonder, thinking about the Finland. Oh. All right, get it right, Denise. Makes me wonder about Finland, like if the culture of locker rooms being more open and exposed for guys fosters some of that more positive body image, whereas the culture for gals of like, oh, we got to kind of stay hidden in here, fosters a little bit more of that self-consciousness.
Yeah, I'm an RA on campus. And so like all the showers and the dorms are like stalls, basically, like, you know, you have the shower curtains and stuff like that. Like everything's very closed off. But in high school, I played in a World Cup in Sweden, and we stayed, like all the teams, you know, that were there for the cup stayed in schools instead of like hotels. But the showers were like very exposed. Like you said, like it was just, you know, shower head. And so we weren't used to that, you know, being like a close soccer team in general, like it wasn't really a problem for us, but we like still showered in like basically like bathing suits. But if you were to like take a night shower, you know, but like a European team was in there, they're just like all, you know, just all exposed or under the same shower head. So it was just, I don't know, it was like a shock for sure. I was like, oh, like this is not what we do, you know, but I'll let you guys have your time. I'll come back later, basically. Yeah.
from at least what I found in Europe, I think it's also the media, because like the Europeans talk a lot about how America has a lot of censored media, especially when coming to like naked people and stuff, and European media does not. Like that's just not a thing. And so I think, I don't know how that plays into body image, but I think it definitely plays into like people just being comfortable being naked. Like all of my European friends were like, oh, why is this even a thought? And I'm like, oh, in America it's not like this. So but I feel like being around that actually did a lot of good for me, because it was like, yo, everyone has different bodies and that's totally okay. So yeah.
Well, I just noticed the time, but thank y'all so much. If anyone has anything else they'd like to add, that's totally fine. That was pretty much the end of my presentation. My conclusion slide was just kind of reiterating what we've talked about before. So yeah, if y'all have anything else you'd like to say, if not, all good. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, bye y'all.
Y'all take care.
Have a good day.